Good day. Welcome to another session of Folk Accountancy Tutorials. Today we are going to talk about cost segregation and estimation, how to separate costs, an extension of the cost behavior, and our focus is going to be on the high-low method. Our focus is cost segregation and estimation, with a special focus on the high-low method. Now, there are so many methods of cost segregation. We can go by the regression method as well. But then, today we want to focus on how to segregate and estimate costs using the high-low method. The high-low method is a method that is used to separate fixed costs into variable and fixed cost components. Now we know that total cost is a mixed cost, and so most of the time when we are given activity levels or outputs or hours of work, we are given the associated cost that relates to the activity levels. Now when we have activity levels and their associated costs, this is the method that will help us to separate the total cost into fixed cost component and a variable cost component. And so I'm going to give you some steps that you are going to follow in order to use the high-low method to separate fixed costs from variable costs. All right, so given total cost, okay, in order to use the high-low method to separate your fixed cost component from your variable cost component in the total cost, you need to follow these steps. First of all, you need to estimate the variable cost per unit. So estimate or find the variable cost per unit for the production. And once you are able to find the variable cost per unit, the next thing you do is to estimate or find your total fixed cost. And once you are able to find your total fixed cost, then you can be able to establish the total cost equation. All right, so we are going to follow these three simple steps. First of all, we have to estimate the variable cost per unit. When we are given a total cost, we have to use the activity levels that are given, and we are going to use the highest and the lowest activity levels. That is why we call it the high-low method. And we are going to estimate the variable cost per unit. After estimating the variable cost per unit, the next thing you need to do is to estimate the total fixed cost. And once you finish estimating the total fixed cost, then finally you can establish the total cost equation, which will help you estimate the total cost at any activity level. And that is what we call cost estimation. And so we are going to first of all separate the cost, find an equation that will help us estimate any total fixed cost that we are given to estimate. Now, just like I said, the first step that we are going to do is to estimate the variable cost per unit, and that is the most important step that you can begin with. Without that, you cannot even proceed with separating the cost. You should be able to determine the variable cost per unit for what you are working with. And so to estimate the variable cost per unit, you need to go by these steps. So steps in estimating the variable cost per unit. The steps in estimating the variable cost per unit. The first step that we have to take is to identify the lowest activity level. That is the first step. The lowest and the highest activity levels. You have to be able to estimate the lowest and the highest activity levels because they may give you a list of activities. It could be more than 2. It could be about 10 or 12. But your focus is to identify which activity level is the highest and which activity level is the lowest. And once you are able to estimate the activity level, the highest and the lowest activity level, the next thing you should know is that every activity level comes with its associated total cost. And so once you are able to estimate the highest activity level and the lowest activity level, you should be able to find the total costs that are associated with both the highest activity level and the lowest activity level. And so that is the second step. Find the total cost find the total cost associated with both the highest and the lowest. The highest and lowest activity levels. Now, mind you, activity levels could be output, hours of work, or any other activity level. But the most important thing that we have to know is that every activity level comes with an associated total cost. And so the first step is to first of all determine which one is the highest activity level and then which one is the lowest activity level. And then the next step is to be able to match the activity level to the associated cost, which will be given to you in the question most of the time. And then once you have been able to identify these two, then the next thing is to be able to know what we do is that we subtract the lowest activity level's cost. Subtract the cost of the lowest activity level from the cost of the highest activity level. So subtract cost of the low from cost of the high. That is the next step. Subtract the cost of the lowest level from the cost of the highest level. And then the fourth step is to subtract the low level activity itself from the highest level. Now, make no mistake about these two. The third point is to subtract the cost, the lowest cost level, or what, let me say that, not necessarily the lowest cost, but the cost that is associated with the lowest level. You subtract that from the cost that is associated with the highest level. And then the fourth point is that you subtract the lower level itself from the highest level. And then finally you divide them. So you divide the result in 3 by the result in 4. So divide result in 3 by your result in 0.4. So that is what we are going to do. In other words, the answer that we are going to have for the third point, we are going to divide that by the fourth point. This may not look very understanding on the eye, but when we take a practical question, I'm sure the understanding will come. Okay, so let us take this question to help us understand. Kakape Company Limited has recorded the following cost in the past 6 months. So we have the months, the production units, and the total cost. In January, there was 5,800 units produced at a total cost of 40,300. In February, 7,700 units produced at a total cost of 47,100 Ghana cedis. In March, there was 8,200 units produced at a total cost of 48,700. In April, 6,100 units at a total cost of 40,600. In May, 6,500 units at a total cost of 44,500. And then finally in June, 7,500 units at a total cost of 47,100. Now, we are required to use the high-low method to estimate the total cost equation. With this type of question, we could see that there are a lot of production units, different production units for each month. These are what we call the activity levels. And so going back to the question, you can see that in the first month was 5,008, there was 7,700, 8,002 and all that. Now, our focus is on the production unit. And that is where we are going to identify the highest of them and the lowest. That is the high-low method. And so looking through the production unit, which one is the highest? The highest production was in March, 8,200. So 8,200 units is the highest units. And the lowest was in January, 5,800 units. And so we are going to pick this 8,200 units and the 5,800 units for whatever we are going to do. The others will not matter again. Take note that the moment you identify the highest level and the lowest level and you pick them for your work, the rest you don't even visit them. They are not important. That is why we call this the high-low method, higher and the lower. And so we are going to look at 5,800 as the lowest and 8,200 as the highest activity level. Now, let us also look at the cost associated with the lowest and the cost associated with the highest. And so we have 5,800 units as the low, and then the high is the 8,200 units. So this is activity level and then the costs involved. So let us look at the total cost involved in each of these activity levels. Now, for the lowest activity level, the total cost involved was 40,300 Ghana cedis. And then for the highest activity level, the total cost involved is 48,700. And so these are the higher and the lower. So we are going to establish the variable cost per unit. And using the steps we studied, we said that the first step is to identify the lowest and the highest activity level. That is what we have done. So that is the first step. The second step is to identify the cost that is associated with each of them. So that is the second step. The third step is to subtract this from that. And the fourth step is to subtract this from that. And so we are going to have the variable cost components, and then we divide the two to find our variable cost per unit. And so basically, what we are going to do is that we'll just find the difference, okay? The difference is what we need. Now, we are going to subtract the low from the high. The low from the high. And so we are going to have 8,400 Ghana cedis as the difference for the total cost. And then we are also going to have 2,400 units as the difference for the activity levels. And so this is what it means. Once you are able to find the lowest and the highest activity level, you subtract the lower from the higher. And once you get this, you can find your variable cost per unit. Your variable cost per unit will be the difference between the cost, which is 8,400, over the difference between the activity levels, which is the 2,400 units. This is how it's supposed to be. And so when we divide, we are going to have variable cost per unit of 3 cedis, 50 pesos. This is how our variable cost per unit is going to be. So these are the 5 steps that I was talking about. On paper, it looks a little difficult, but in practice, it's very easy. Just find the difference. Now, another way you could have given a general formula for finding the variable cost per unit would have been this. So you could have just gone by this way, that your variable cost per unit equals to 48,700 minus 40,300 all over 8,200 units minus 5,800 units. And that would have still given us 3 cedis, 50 pesos per unit. And so this is an alternative way. You either do it this way or you can go this way. And whichever way that you go, your answer is the same. And so looking at what we have done, we can deduce a general formula by saying that the variable cost per unit is estimated as cost of high minus cost of low all over high minus low. This is how you can also get the variable cost per unit. I'm sure to get a variable cost per unit is very understandable at this point. All right, so now that we have the variable cost per unit, we can estimate the total cost function by first of all finding the total or the fixed cost. Now, to find the fixed cost, we need to apply the total cost equation. We know that total cost equals to fixed cost plus variable cost. This is the total cost. But the variable cost here is the quantity multiplied by the variable cost per unit. We know that to get the total variable cost, it is the quantity produced multiplied by the variable cost per unit. And so we can expand this to be total cost equal to fixed cost plus your quantity, which is the activity level, times the variable cost per unit. So this expression in bracket that I have here is the same as the total variable cost that I have here. And so this is the total cost equation. And so what we are going to do is that we have to find the fixed cost. The fixed cost is what we are going to find. And so we can just put in any of the activity levels. Now that we have our variable cost per unit, we can just choose any of the activity levels and just substitute them into this equation and then find our fixed cost. And so all the time, the moment you're able to find your variable cost per unit, the next step, I gave you that as the first step. I said that the first thing is to what? Find your variable cost per unit. The second step is to estimate your total fixed cost. And the final step is to find your total cost equation. And so we are going to find the variable cost, the fixed cost, sorry, which is the second step. And so we can choose any of the activity levels, whether the highest or the lowest. Any of them that we put here, we can get our fixed cost. So let us imagine using the lowest level. If we are using the lowest level, total cost, TC, associated with the lowest level will be 40,300. Then it will be equal to a fixed cost that we don't know, plus what is the quantity that is associated with the lowest level? That is 5,800 multiplied by the variable cost per unit, which we just estimated to be 3 cedis 50 pesos, so 3.5. And so once we are able to get this, automatically we can do change of subject and find our fixed cost. So if we do change of subject and then we solve this equation, our fixed cost will be equal to 20,000 Ghana cedis. So this is how it's going to be. You multiply these two and then you bring it to the other side of the equation to subtract from the 4,300. And then you have 20,000 as your fixed cost. So we are done with the second step. So now we have found our variable cost per unit. We've been able to estimate the total fixed cost as well. So now that we know the fixed cost, then we can find the cost function. The purpose of estimating the cost function is to be able to, that is why I said cost segregation and estimating. We have been able to segregate the cost. It's going to be used in estimation, predictions. And so you can be asked, find the total cost that will be involved in producing, let's say, 100,000 units. You are going to use the total cost function that you have established to be able to tell how much we are going to produce. So we are going to find the total cost function, and I'm going to clean this side so that we'll be able to use this space to find the total cost function. Now, the total cost function, like I said, is your total cost equals to fixed cost plus variable cost. And this variable cost is the same as your quantity times the variable cost per unit. Okay? And so this is how it's going to be. And so now that we have our fixed cost and then we have the variable cost per unit, we can put them into this and find the total cost function. So total cost will now be equal to, fixed cost is 20,000. So 20,000 plus the K, we don't know for now because we can use it. So variable cost per unit is 3.5. So 3.5 multiplying the K is the same as total cost will be equal to 20,000 plus 3.5 K. So this will be our total cost equation for now. And so having estimated this total cost equation, it means that whatever activity level that we will be asked by the exams or by the paper to find, if we are asked to estimate, let's say 100,000 units, 100,000 units will now be the K. And so we just come and put 100,000 in place of K, and then we can find our total cost. If we are asked to estimate how much total cost will be incurred in producing 50,000 units, we just put 50,000 as a K, we multiply and then we add and we have our total cost. And so the purpose of the high-low method is generally to get the total cost function. So first of all, we have to estimate the variable cost per unit, and then we can use any of the activity levels, whether the high or the low, to find the fixed cost as we have done. And then finally, we will establish the total cost function. And so assuming that we are told that how much will it cost to produce 17,000 units, and so 17,000 units will now be the unit. And so I will say total cost will be equal to 20,000 plus 3.5. The K will now be 17,000, and so we'll just multiply 17,000 by 3.5 and then we'll find our total cost. And so when we multiply 17,000 by 3.5, we have 59,500, and then we add that to our 20,000, and so our total cost will now be 79,500 Ghana cedis. And so what I mean is that once you are able to use your already established activity levels to find your variable cost per unit, fixed cost, and therefore the total cost function, you can predict the cost for any estimated activity level that you are given. All right, so this is it with the first level of the high-low method. I'm sure understanding has been achieved. All right, so if understanding was not achieved, just know that there are some more questions that you can get to solve, and I'm going to also solve some other questions later. But what I want us to know now is that this is the first step of the high-low method. Now we are in our next video on this cost segregation. We'll be looking at high-low method with a step up in fixed cost. Okay, there are situations where the highest level may exceed their activity range of a particular fixed cost, and then fixed cost can step up. So we'll look at how to go about that as well. And then when we are done with that, we'll look at when there is a change in variable cost per unit as well. But until we meet again, remember to subscribe to the channel. Invite your friends to the channel to benefit from what you are benefiting from. Don't be selfish. Let us grow together. Let us learn together and be successful together. Until we meet again another time, it is bye for now.